Incidentally, as soon as you get the choke solenoid hooked up, sight it and make sure the body and this piece of wire are in as straight a line as possible. On this one, it's slightly bent. An easy way to line it up is take a flat blade screwdriver and slide it in the slot and just move the choke actuator over a little bit. So now the wire is pulling in almost a straight line. Let me move it over just a little bit more. Okay. Next step, let's take a drill and drill a hole right here in this webbing, and then right here in this webbing, and then drill a hole here in this webbing and a hole here in this webbing. Keep in mind that the holes are all going to be horizontal, drilled through the webbing. Then take the two longest zip ties that come in the kit and feed them through the holes in the webbing. So that's one zip tie in place. That's the second zip tie in place. So needless to say, they're just running through horizontal holes in the webbing. Then take this wire. Keep in mind, this wire in the production kit is going to be yellow in color. Run it behind the main harness and in between the air box and the fan shroud. Take the float bowl vent line and a float bowl drain hose out of these two slots in the main frame. This wire will be routed back right next to the solenoid. Then take the battery. This will be the auxiliary battery. It powers just the radio. Set it right on top of the two reinforcing webs that you had drilled holes through, and secure it with the two zip ties that you inserted through those holes. Just go ahead and trim the ends off the zip ties. Now, the battery post that's farthest from you is the positive. Clip the 1/4 inch positive spade terminal to that battery terminal. Then come around to the solenoid. You notice there are two red rubber boots on the solenoid. The boot that is closest to you is positive. Actually, they're both positive, but this one is hot all the time, from the main battery as well as from the charging system. Remove the nut from the top of this one. It may give you a little bit more room if you remove the nut that is also below the ring terminals that are already on. Gives you just a little bit more room to work with. But take this wire with the diode in place and feed it back through the back side of the red boot so that it lays right next to all the other wires. that goes. So at this time, you will now have 4 ring terminals. Main one from the battery, then from the charging loop, then from the exciter side of the solenoid, and then last but not least from the auxiliary battery, so that it charges the auxiliary battery also. Slide all the ring terminals back over the post. Put the nut in place. Do not over tighten the nut. Keep in mind that the stud coming out of the top of the solenoid is brass, not steel. And take the insulator boot and slide it back over it so it covers everything. Then, included in the kit is a green wire. That'll be the ground terminal for the battery. Right over here, there is a stud that goes into the engine block, and right over here there's another one. Take your pick, whichever one's easiest to get at. Most likely this one. Put the ring terminal over the stud, put the nut back on and tighten it down. Okay, with that done, next step, this gray lead is used strictly for programming. What it does is allows the radio to identify the key fob. The top switch over here that used to be the on-off switch for the generator now turns on the radio. So you'll turn the radio to the on position. Then you'll come over to the gray wire. Make sure that there's a little bit of the conductor exposed. Hold it against the ground terminal. With it against the ground battery terminal, press any button on the key fob. You'll see the red light on the key fob light up. Release it. Disconnect the gray lead. Put the wire nut back over it. Shut the radio back off again. Then turn the radio back on. Then test choke solenoid. The top button should power the solenoid and the starter. The bottom button should now power just the starter, no solenoid. Excuse me, that was button number 2. Then button number 4 should turn the ignition on by connecting the condenser charge coil to the CDI module. So we'll push the bottom button, then push the top button, thing starts and runs. Push the bottom button again, shuts it off. If you want to then operate the economy control by wireless, put the economy in the off position, turn the radio to the on position, take the key fob, press the bottom button, lights the light, press the top button, which is start for a cold motor. This is choke and starter. Press button number 3, puts it in economy mode. If you want to release it from economy mode, press button number 3 again. Back into economy mode, button number 3. Then to shut it back off again, button number 4. Incidentally, this light will stay on for a couple of minutes if you do not have any load on it when you turn it off. That's strictly because the DC bus is charged. If you have a load plugged into it, this light will go off almost immediately. The next segment of the videos, we'll go ahead and put the cabinet on. But this is as good a time as any to go ahead and close this one up. Okay. Final step to this project is to go ahead and reassemble the cabinet. Keep in mind that if you do install the radio kits on these, incidentally, the intake boot should be plugged into the air box first. Trust me, it just makes it easier. And this portion of the boot should be parallel with the ground. First thing you do, feed the float bowl drain hose and float bowl vent tube through the 2 slots in the bottom. As I was saying, if you do choose to install the wireless remote start kit, make certain to shut the radio off after you're through using the generator. If you leave the radio turned on, it's just like taking a flashlight and tossing it in a drawer, turned on. The next time you go to use it, the batteries will be dead. You just stick a hand in the back here and tuck the boot into the slot in the rear cover. You'll be able to look into the rear housing and make sure that it has not popped out of the back of the airbox where you initially slid it. Take a flashlight and check your intake boot. This one looks great. I like to install one of the bottom bolts to hold everything in place neatly, then come and install the 2 end bolts on the back cover. The reason for this is the 2 end bolts have a nut on the back side of them. So I like to go ahead and get those at this point. Get the toughest part over with. There are a total of 6 screws that go into the bottom. They are identical. The 2 end ones that have a nut on the back side are much shorter than the 6 on the very bottom. Next step is to go ahead and take the fuel tank. Fuel tank is easiest to install. You slide the back into the 2 notches first, and then lower the front into place. I like to go ahead and slide the fuel hose onto the fuel selector valve, just in case this little clamp pops loose. That way it does not spill fuel all over the ground, or all over the floor of my shop in this case. Front of the fuel tank is held on by the same 2 screws that you removed. You're taking the fuel tank out of it. I just squeeze a little bit on the covers so that when I go to slide everything in place, it fits just a little bit tighter. There are slots in the front and rear cover that the fuel tank cover slides into. Take the wire from the radio, just slide it up between the fuel tank and the fuel tank cover. Go ahead and take the cover back off to get it way up in there. The higher the radio is mounted, or the higher the antenna is mounted, the better the reception will be. Take a little piece of electrical tape. Put this in place. That way it'll stay in place when we go to do it. Let's go ahead and stop the video and we'll pick it up from there.